Project 1 Porcelain, presented by Heba El Sawy, Mariem Afifi, Gaber, Mostafa Gaber, and Rola Tarazi. Before we begin this presentation, we'd like to give a general overview of how this presentation will proceed. Part A includes the introduction, the different types of porcelain, classification, comparisons, manufacturing process, installation, sample of materials, technical specifications. Part B includes the manufacturers and suppliers of the product in Egypt. Let us begin. Now to introduce our material porcelain. First of all, the origin of the word porcelain comes from the French word porcelain or shell, and according to the American National Standards Institute, porcelain tiles are generally made by the dust-pressed method of a composition resulting in a tile that is dense, impervious, fine-grained, and smooth with a sharply formed face. The history of porcelain tiles is a global one. The manufacturing of porcelain in China dates back to the 14th century. However, modern mass production of ceramic and porcelain tiles started in the early 1700s in London, and it wasn't until the late 1700s that the US produced porcelain tiles. There are certain properties of porcelain tiles that make it quite exceptional. It's dense, it's very hard wearing and easy to maintain, it's waterproof, fine-grained, smooth with a sharply formed face, and the durability rate usually starts at 5, which makes them the hardest wearing tiles on the market. Also, porcelain tiles may take on the appearance of a natural slate and other types of stone. Porcelain is not just a generic one type of material. There are actually several types of porcelain. There's the natural or matte porcelain. This type of product comes out of the oven in a form and undertakes no further processing. There's the structured porcelain, and this type of porcelain is extremely textured and quite often used for external purposes. Normally, sealing is not required. There is the polished or semi-polished type of porcelain, and this is a complicated technique in which there is a finishing added to the tile after the firing process. And finally, there's the glazed porcelain, which is the most common type of porcelain and will be discussed later on in the presentation in more detail. Now for the classification of porcelain. Porcelain and ceramic do have a lot of similarities. However, there are certain situations where porcelain tiles function better than ceramic tiles. For example, in outdoor floors, porcelain has higher resistance to freezing and cracks. Also, porcelain is less porous, thus making it easier to clean and less likely to stain. Porcelain also has a higher durability than ceramic, therefore it is less likely to crack. It also has a higher acid resistivity, and it's available in luminous. There are also several technicalities that distinguish porcelain from other ceramics. There is the water absorption rate of porcelain. There's the certification of porcelain, which differs than ceramics. There's the density, manufacturing, and most definitely the cost. Porcelain can also be classified based on a scale that indicates the areas of use set by the manufacturer. However, this scale is not a measure of quality. The scale ranges from 0 to 5, 0 being the weakest and no foot traffic, for example wall tiles, 5 being it is designed for heavy traffic and is suggested for residential, commercial, and institutional floors subjected to heavy traffic. Furthermore, comparisons in porcelain can be according to the quality of surface finishes. There are glazed, polished, semi-polished, natural, matte, structured, rock finish types of porcelain. And these 4 different types of quality of surface finishes can differ according to the surface physical appearance, the manufacturer, surface durability and resistance, colors and texture, maintenance, sealing, and commonly used locations. There can be comparisons made in porcelain according to the quality of the body. For example, for the types of body, there is the through fully bodied, there's the colored body, there's the double loaded, and the soluble salts. And they differ according to composition, appearance, performance, strength, and function. For example, let's take composition for an example. The full bodied is consistent throughout the whole tile, while the colored body does not have a consistent surface porcelain layer. And in terms of appearance, soluble salts are limited exclusively to prints and patterns, while both the full-bodied and double-loaded can be textured. And the colored body, of course, only comes in a variety of colors. And in terms of strength, the composition resonates the level of strengths, as the through and the double-loaded porcelain tiles are stronger than the colored and the soluble salts. And thus, the strength and form follows the function. The stronger porcelains, which are the through full-bodied and the double-loaded, are used for heavy installations and commercial projects, while the colored body and soluble salt are used for residential and low-traffic areas. Furthermore, there can be comparisons according to the quality of the surface finish. The glazed, polished, semi-polished, natural matte, and structured rock finish can be compared to each other according to surface physical appearance, manufacture, surface durability and resistance, and colors and textures. For example, in terms of surface physical appearance, the glazed is glossy and smooth, while the structured rock finish is mimicking the natural stone appearance, therefore it has a more rough surface that contrasts with the glazed. And for example, in the manufacture, there are also several differences. For example, the natural matte undergoes no further processing after the kiln and is just used directly after it comes out of the kiln, while the polished and semi-polished actually has to have a sealer protect the particles on the surface. And then there's the surface durability and resistance. And obviously the surface durability explains or emphasizes the strength and the resistance of the certain tiles. For example, the glazed tile is non-porous and therefore is super stain resistant and moisture resistant. The natural matte, due to its lack of glossiness, is slip resistant due to the no glaze slippery layer, while on the other hand the polished and semi-polished has a higher probability of stains occurring if it is not sealed well. And although these four tiles can be played with colors, the one that can be highly textured is of course the structured rock finish, as its variety and name itself is mainly based on the textures and mimicking of expensive materials such as marble. Now, to discuss the unique manufacturing process of porcelain. This diagram in front of you shows the overall overview actually of the production process of porcelain. There's the raw materials, then the grinding, then the spray drying, then the powder mixing, then the pressing, then the drying, glazing, firing, sorting, and packaging. These processes will be discussed in more detail in the following slides. Now, the first step to the manufacturing process is the raw materials, the primary raw materials that we get from Mother Earth, that include clay, feldspar, flint, silica, quartz, and even in some cases talc, white clays, calcite, dolomite, and even sand. Furthermore, the raw materials are then moved inside the factory where they are kept inside storage units, and in these storage units, the raw materials are classified according to their types. The raw materials then are placed on conveyor belts, and certain specified mixtures are actually achieved by the speed of in which the conveyor belt is moving. The conveyor belt then delivers the raw materials to the storage tank, as seen in the pictures provided in the slide. Now we enter the grinding phase. Now that the raw materials have been grinded, the next step starts. This is when the product is then fed to mixing tanks that contain water and ceramic pellets. In these mixing tanks, the raw materials are then transformed into a liquid-like material called a slurry. Now comes the very interesting phase called the spray drying or atomizing phase. This is now when the slurry is fed to the atomizer. The atomizer actually sprays the slurry into the middle of this very large tank that has a current of hot air right in the center. Now, as the slurry is being poured, imagine it being airborne by this hot air. And as it is being airborne, it quickly dries and is formed into an atomized powder. Like what falls is the atomized powder. The next phase is called the pressing phase. Now the powder is then transferred into a large holding vat. A vat is like a pusher which pushes the powder on a tray and distributes it evenly on a mold. However, this push is not just a simple push. The vet applies a force of 340 to 400 kilograms per square centimeter. The next phases include the drying phase, the glazing phase, and the screening phase. In the drying phase, the product must then be dried further to remove all moisture so that the product may remain stable and homogeneous in the cooking process when it is placed inside the kiln. Remember, this homogeneity is key in the making of porcelain tiles. The next phase is the glazing phase. Glazing is like a glass-like structure which is applied to the surface as a spray, waterfall, or screening or dry glazing method. As you can see on the right, these two pictures show the waterfall method and the screening method. Not to be confused with the next method, which is called the screening method. In this phase, rollers are used to apply a layer of design. As seen in the figures below, several layers can be added. Now, for the final phases of the manufacturing process that will be discussed in this presentation. These are the final firing and quality control. In the final firing, the product after the screening and glazing is placed inside the kiln once again. The final stage, once it has been released from the kiln, is quality control. In this phase, both humans and machines carry out tests to test the purity of the design. Now here comes the installation phase. Now that we have our tiles, we now must implement them. Also, it must be kept in mind that this installation phase is not just a single phase, it's actually a process. First of all, the design and size of the tile must be chosen. The horizontality of the floor is checked and must be adjusted. However, in the case of toilets and kitchens, the floor slope towards drainage pipe is considered. The worker then adjusts a shirb using mizan khit, which becomes his working level. The floor is then covered with a layer of sand. Think of it this way. The worker starts from the inaccessible corner and then moves his way gradually throughout the whole area. Now, when placing the tiles are actually dampened with water to ensure that the cement water content is unaffected. The worker then places a certain amount of cement mortar and then places the tile based on the design and required pattern. And then ever so delicately, the worker will gently hammer the tile to ensure fixing equal distribution of cement mortar and to ensure that no voids are found beneath the tile. Again, quality control is very important here, and the horizontality of the tile is checked using mizan mayo. Furthermore, in the cleaning up phase, we must remove the excess cement mortar, which will definitely be found. And again, these steps must be repeated per tile. Again, and the connection between certain tiles are also play an important role in the design. And this connection must be slightly opened using the tip of the mastarine to remove the gray cement color from the surface. And after hardening, the connection between the two tiles is then covered with a certain paste of the same color of the tiles according to the design, of course. As you can see in this slide, this is a graphical presentation of what was discussed in the previous slide. Of course, the installation process requires very specific equipment. This slide shows the equipment used. There is the mizan maya, mastarin, badwa, mizan khit, talush, manga ferra, qas'a, and sand, cement, and water. However, it must be kept in mind that most of the porcelain in Egypt is usually imported. As you can see in this slide, these are samples of catalogs of imported porcelain from China. And just like anything in the architectural and construction world, there are also technical specifications and standards for porcelain. These standards are provided by the American Society for Testing and Materials, American National Standards Institute, and the Tile Council of America, TCA, Handbook for Ceramic Tile Installation. More, there are certain tests to ensure that a satisfactory level of porcelain has been met. These standards and product test data have been set by the previously stated organizations. These certain tests include water absorption, abrasive wear, breaking strength, bond strength, coefficient of frictions, facial dimensions, range of thickness, warpage diagonally, wedging, and scratch hardening. Furthermore, there are also technical specifications and standards for the different types of porcelain. For example, unglazed and glazed porcelain tiles have specific standards that need to be met also. Furthermore, this does not just end here. There are also very specific tables filled with so much data about this technical data of porcelain tiles, as shown here. Furthermore, to emphasize what has been stated previously, there are also technical specifications for every single type of porcelain. For example, here is the technical specifications for unglazed porcelain tiles. And furthermore, there are also standards for the polished porcelain tiles. It must be kept in mind that most of these tests are taken out for safety measures. For example, there is the slip resistance test that is used prevalently in the UK and Italy, but is also recognized worldwide. It measures the coefficient of dynamic friction mu that the tile has when it is either dry or wet, and its response to the passage of a sliding leather or rubber body. And on the basis of the mu value, the tiles are classified as follows: hazardous, slipperiness, excessive slipperiness, satisfactory friction, excellent friction. Furthermore, there are tests that are conducted on porcelain when it is placed upon a certain angle. This is of course again for safety measures, to classify the level of slipperiness according to a certain angle, and once again this is for safety measures. Not all of these tests are purely for practicality or safety. There are even tests based on aesthetics. For example, the stain resistance test is actually conducted for aesthetical reasons. In this test, the surface of the tile is placed in contact with 3 staining agents: olive oil, an iodine solution in alcohol, and chrome green in light oil. After 24 hours, the stained surfaces are cleaned and the visual classification is made, as you can see in the table shown in the following slide. In addition to all of these tests, there are also tests conducted on porcelain that test its bending moment and how it reacts to certain bending strengths, as shown in the following slide. We now fall upon the final part of our presentation, in which we talk about the suppliers of porcelain found here in Egypt and the main producers and suppliers. The main producers and suppliers include Porcellina Majestic, Ceramica Alpha, Gamma, Ceramica Royal, Mahgoub, Mostafa Al Sawy, and Abdelaziz Al Sawy. Also, we have included a map of the location of the suppliers here in Egypt, provided by Google Earth. And that is it for our presentation. Thank you so much for staying with us. Please find in the following slides a list of our references and sources. Thank you very much.